just wanted to thank Chris and Jenny for inviting us. This is like one of the, I mean, really probably is the event that we as a company have been most excited for since, quite literally, probably since Y Combinator Demo Day back when we launched 4 years ago. Because, when we first started doing this, I actually wasn't there at the very beginning, but when our founders decided, all right, let's try to build something to fix some of the issues with commenting. They didn't really know if anyone would care. I mean, this is 2007, and commenting had been around for, 10 years or more, and very, very little had been done in space. And there are all kinds of ideas that always float around, but nothing really stuck. And thankfully, we have seen a lot of progress and innovation since, although still clearly not enough since we're all here in this room. But what's even more reassuring is that some really smart folks and energetic folks, again, like people in this room, are interested in this topic, and this is like the ultimate focus group for us. So I'll go over a few things, mostly really to get your brains going and start generating ideas, because I've been sitting here more to listen and absorb and hopefully support you guys either through data or technical capability that we can help you guys with, or what have you. But really quickly, I wanted to, for those of you who aren't that familiar with Disqus, I'm going to try to whiz by this part. Disqus is a universal commenting platform, so it's networked across hundreds of thousands of communities all over the web. And we sometimes like to show this visual just to describe what we do, because a lot of people, when they think of a comment system, they think of only what's there in that middle box, which is really the actual posting interface and the thread interface you see on the web page. And that's certainly part of it, but there's a whole sort of a networked aspect to it, what we're calling this federation social connectivity box. And then there's the whole non-user facing side of it too, which is the admin and moderation publisher tools. And I think what's relevant, what's nice about this for us as a company and for this kind of event, is that we can get some line of sight into both of those end users, essentially. So we'll hopefully try to help with some sort of insights on what we've seen from not just publishers, but also the end user, the commenter themselves, and also the non-commenter, the person who may skip by or maybe just take a glance and not really stick around. And then also really quickly, just to give you a sense of what's happened with our company. So we have gotten to a fairly sizable scale, and the reason I mention that is that when we talk about things today, and myself included, I'm probably going to make a lot of gross generalizations. It's just really important to keep in mind that when you're dealing, especially with our data set that we look at, which is, these are actually a month or two old, so almost 1 million communities, almost 500 million monthly uniques we touch every month. You have, that runs the gamut from the tiniest little Tumblr blog to CNN to, a political site, newspaper sites, magazine sites, small, medium, large, you name it. And so the trick there is to realize that, one community can be so different and have such different priorities. Like for instance, one of the things that Clay was talking about, there's just no one rule of thumb that works for everyone, and that's been, quite frankly, a big challenge for us. And it's some of the things we're really thinking about, how to kind of arm individual community managers and admins and moderators with the ability to kind of customize to optimize for their own voice, their own community, their own objectives. So what I wanted to spend most of the time on, and I'd really like to just shut up after a few minutes, but I wanted to put together a few kind of top-of-the-mind thoughts on 3 major things. So the first is where we think we've seen pretty good progress. Again, this is based on our data set, our observations, and also our biases. In fact, my biases. This list, this is just totally up for debate, not only in this room, but also in my own company. I'm sure people would debate me, but take that for what it's worth. But and we picked I picked arbitrarily 4 things in each category, so we have a dozen to think about. In the first category, where we think we've seen pretty good progress in the last 3-4 years that we've been around, is better design and just overall richer user experience. There's definitely, you still see like some pretty kind of neglected, comment threads or comment communities with respect to, the design and the usability and just the beauty of it. But I think not just with commenting, but just with, any Web 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it, application or service these days, design good UX is just a must-have now. You can't just think about it as a secondary consideration. So that is definitely applied to commenting, we think, and so things like just more careful attention to really fluid Ajax-y kind of interaction and multimedia and real-time updating and all those bells and whistles have, I think, gone a long way. The second is what I sometimes call peer-to-peer interaction, which I think Clay was kind of referring to on the conversational side of that spectrum that he mentioned. And that, again, this is a little bit of a generalization because for all communities, I think a lot of them would value maybe the other side of that a little bit more. But in general, I think Disqus is always, the design philosophy has always been to be a very forum-like experience. Actually, Disqus, when it was founded, originally, when it was conceived in some computer cluster at UC Davis, where the founders were, before they dropped out, I think they originally were envisioning forum software, because that's, quite frankly, another area which is probably ripe for innovation. But early on, for whatever reason, it turned out that commenting, there's tons of pain points, tons of opportunity, and sort of did a very early pivot, and Disqus focused on that contextual commenting. But I think the design philosophy of what we refer to as that forum-like experience, and one of the things that how we define forum-like experience is high degree of peer-to-peer interaction, or very much on that conversational side of that spectrum. Generally, we see when one of the metrics we track is when there's, let's say, one given community, one site, whether it's CNN or Tiny Blog, and we look at their stats for the last month. We also try to look at what percentage of total comments were replies to someone else's comment. And usually when that percentage is higher, it correlates, and we haven't done very sort of scientifically defensible studies on this, but just a little bit more anecdotally, although we see it over and over, usually when that percentage is high, it correlates to a pretty good, healthy, vibrant community. Of course, sometimes, it can certainly be about people blaming each other, but in general, I think that's where we're quite happy to see a higher degree of communities more on the right-hand side of Clay's scale there. Third thing, which I think is one of the big, kind of the big innovations when Disqus first launched, and actually there's a couple of other companies around then that were kind of experimenting with the same thing, is connecting communities, de-siloing the commenting experience. It used to be very much that commenting was just, very disparate, like you leave one there, you leave one there, you leave one there, you never know what happened to it, you can't, you as a user have no real control over it, if the site goes away, your comment goes away forever, maybe you left a brilliant comment that was quite frankly better than the blog post itself. Seriously, we see that all the time, we believe that. And then, it was also just harder to sort of be portable across all these communities that visit and participate. And with things like our platform, things like sort of Facebook Connect and OAuth and all those great things, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that's certainly a big progress area, I think, which I also think there's a lot more interesting things that can be done there. But the last thing then is, I actually kind of just mentioned this too, is the social integrations. That's a pretty, I think it's kind of a no-brainer when a lot of the big platforms started to open up a little bit, open up their APIs. We were pretty quick to jump on that, and I'll talk a little bit about what has worked well and hasn't necessarily worked as well as people may think with that. But in general, it's a great thing. I think we see ourselves as kind of a bridge to a lot of those platforms, and anyway, so that's where you can, again, feel free to argue with me, and I hope you do, but I think from our perspective, we've seen reasonably good progress. Then there's the kind of getting there. We see a light at the end of the tunnel. So one of the things is around discovery, and I think that's a follow-on from better connected communities. So, and there's also a number of means now to be able to get insight to this kind of implicit graph that, let's say you like to go to Boing Boing and your own blog and PBS and IGN, whatever, and it turns out that we can see these other folks that also like to go to those places, and you may even get to know them because you guys are frequent, sort of you guys hang out in the same communities. We even see communities where they transition to offline gatherings. And then, it turns into a means of discovery, either discovering new people that share your interests, discovering new topics that maybe were kind of more tangentially linked to what you thought you were most interested in, but turns out you were really interested in them, and discovering new